What's going on, everybody? Oh my God, what is happening? Am I clearer? What is? Oh God, you could really see. I got a new camera, a new phone camera. Okay, so I'm one of those guys who, it still works, so I'm still gonna use the phone, right? It still works, yeah. So I'm not going to replace it until it's broken. And that happened over the weekend. I replaced my iPhone 6S with an iPhone 13 Pro. Wow. Amazing. So hopefully the video quality is way better. And I actually recorded 10 videos already with this phone. And I did this whole spiel kind of like I'm doing right now, but like way grander, and I was more excited and all that kind of thing. I'm less excited now because I messed up on those 10 videos. And the quality, you could probably pick out the 10 that they are. The video quality is not as good because there's a setting on this phone that I wasn't aware of that made it not compatible, like the files were not working when I transferred them to my computer to edit, and it wasn't working. And I was just like, oh my God, am I going to have to record these 10 videos over again? I don't want to do that. I don't want to do that. So I didn't, and it's what it is. The audio quality is fantastic, though, because I'm using my microphone over here, and that's been working. So I'm pretty happy about that. But anyways, fantastic. Today, what are we doing? We are doing, this is not a donation request. I'm doing it. We are doing a two-part interview. Oh, I split up into two parts. It's one whole interview, but I like to keep things under 20 minutes if I can. So this was like a 30-minute interview that I cut into two parts. And this is Neil Peart 2014 House of Strombo or Strombo Show or whatever. It's that cat. It's that guy. So I'm sure you are familiar with the one that I'm talking about. That's what we're checking out today. This is part one. If you're new here, please subscribe. Check out my videos, all kinds of videos, reaction videos, bass videos, music videos. Check it out. If you like the channel, if you want to support the channel, all kinds of ways, you can hit super thanks underneath this video. You can hit me direct in the description. I got PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, Amazon wishlist, mailing address, and I do donation request videos. So if there's something you want me to listen to, watch, talk about, a question, hit me direct, PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, and in the notes section, leave a description, leave a link, let me know what you want me to check out, and I'll make a video. Thank you to everybody that has hit me these past couple months with PayPal, Cash App, Venmo, super thanks, all of it. It is absolutely amazing, fantastic. I love doing the donation videos. It's really cool. I'm being put onto some really awesome stuff. Specifically, I'm loving Max Webster and Steven Wilson right now. I'm like, I haven't been digging outside of the videos you've seen, but I'm like, I want more of that stuff. That's awesome. Max Webster, I'm like, guys, these guys are awesome. These guys are awesome. And I got hit up for some Kim Mitchell, like separate, right? His solo stuff. And so far I'm like, man, why did you stop doing Max Webster? Max Webster was so freaking cool. And I don't know what you're doing over here. Maybe I haven't heard the right stuff yet, but I'm just like, God damn, Max Webster is so cool. I'm putting on other musicians to Max Webster. I'm like, have you heard of Max Webster? Listen to this. Yeah, it's great. It's awesome. Super cool. So that's what we're checking out today. You should stick around in this video towards the end. I'll just leave it at that. All right, let's do this. I'll just do this video right here. Neil Peart, Strombo interview, part 1, 2014. Bam.
Good day, sir. How are you?
Good day. Nice to see you again.
Welcome to the home.
The Rider of the Wilderness.
That's right. I look forward to your books because it helps me deal with the winter. and prepare for the next riding season.
Yeah, well, there's a certain element of consolation that I'm glad to share in that sense, in that I have a friend right now who's laid up, for instance, in the hospital and I sent him a copy of the book because he's another motorcycle rider. I said, this, not to remind you of what you're missing, but to re-inspire you for the future. And a comparison like that, or in wintertime too, to read these stories over, at a time when you're not able to take part in those activities.
So this has to do with
far
the
near
book
is
release.
this book. And so this does stuff like your last book where you'd post it online and people would have access to this material. But talk about the idea of giving them a hard copy and essentially.
Yeah, there's a satisfaction just in the doing of a craft, and putting words together is my oldest instinct, and trying to communicate in that way. Before I discovered drums, I discovered words, and consequently that became a lifetime ambition to try to share those things. So I do take pleasure in just putting them together, and especially since I kind of have the hybrid form of using photography and words to try to bring people to the places that have moved me, and talk about the people there and the experiences that I've had as a human being, as an audience of nature, and all of that sharing. But there is nothing compares to putting that into a real book, and hopefully this craft will survive, that people will always want objects to hold, because as much as I enjoy looking at the stories online and seeing the photographs, and they're nicely designed and presented, and I take a lot of care with the editing and so on, and the actual content, as you would say, remains the same, but the presentation is so much different. And one of the elements that I remark on in the foreword to the book is I want people to know care has been taken here, and when you've made something carefully like that, and music, one of the things that we try to hold on to and are desperately holding on to is presenting it as a physical object, combined with other graphic arts and with the art of making things.
I remember it started the conversation in my head, at least in the late 70s and into the 80s. I kept hearing an awful lot about the disposable generation, and this was the generation where there was no care given to almost anything. And we're decades into that now.
That's very interesting. And yes, we have absolutely seen the retrenchment of people in the artisanal word. That word alone, right, is a total counterpoint to what you're saying, because we discovered all that in food, and in we had fast food, and now we have slow food.
Right.
And blogging, again, was supposed to be a disposable form of verbiage and communication, but now we have slow blogging, where people like myself take a lot of care into what we post
Slow
online.
blogging.
And we post online for an audience that we hope is like ourselves and will care about these things and care about the caring that's been taken.
Because in the end, isn't this really, this is just my own theory, but in the disposable context, so much was what it gave us. But what we've come to realize over time, that a life well lived is one where you can experience the experience of others and share it with others. Oh,
man. What makes novels great? And yes, it might be possible to absorb those in an audiobook form. It doesn't have to be a thing of paper and ink and glue. But yes, that is the thing we're fighting now, is the polarity, isn't it? In the disparity that people display in their interests, and the cliques that they gravitate towards necessarily polarize them more and more. And what we're losing is that commonality of understanding how another person lives. And you as a traveler, that's one of the greatest gifts that I feel, is riding past people at work and people at home, people with their families, people with their friends, and observing all of that. And one reason why I do like traveling alone, it is a bit solitary and morose, and it's awfully nice to have a companion at the end of the day to talk about things with. But on the other hand, when I travel alone, I am much more in tune with the people around me. And if I'm sitting at dinner, I'm eavesdropping and I'm looking around and collecting stories, in a sense, but collecting other people's lives. And if you want to be any kind of a commentator on life around you, you can't lose touch with that, or you really have nothing to talk about anymore, right? If you're not in touch with looking at these people and feeling for the field workers that I ride past in agricultural areas, or looking at small towns and going past the courthouse, and there are so many bits of life, and diners and motels and gas stations, and watching them rise and fall over time, and thinking, I bet that person's sad they had to close their restaurant, because that's some person's restaurant, right?
Right. I often think about, when I was reading a lot about Woody Guthrie and how he was talking about even that Dust Bowl era, just talking about what Americans were going through in the South specifically. And now I ride through parts of the States, the same places I rode through first 20 years ago, and you see it change. And you can see similarities. You can look around and think, right, this is a place that is never one thing. It's constantly being born and dying. I don't know where we are now in it, because I haven't seen a lot of the rebirth yet in certain parts of the country.
No.
But I see it in people's eyes, and I see, well, you're not, be it the connected generation or whatever it is we are now, you see that people know that there's another way. There's options in life. It's just a very interesting thing to look in people's eyes now and think, this isn't 50 years ago.
Right.
You
In
do
very
it.
many ways, and for good and ill,
Yeah.
you know, and you have to look at eventually the positive side of the revolution in media and publishing and music right now is wholesale. Right, it's complete, from the lowliest guy in his garage with a guitar to the corporations that own entertainment. All of it has
Right.
changed and gone. People are finding new ways through it. It's so encouraging to me, and finding new ways to make it work, as it were. And that's what it'll take. And I've noticed in print journalism, for example, you notice them getting smaller, but suddenly there's a resurgence of tightness and professionalism now that's a leaning effect right now, and it might come out of it healthier, and maybe people still will want print journalism, and maybe it goes more and more toward a tablet and all that, but the quality of thinking and writing and analysis should still be in demand.
I think there's also an element of just, we've all looked around and went, okay, the bastards have been lying to us. Right, we've figured it out that people have been bullshitting us for so long that if we don't start reading real quality journalism, we're going to fall prey to that as well.
Right, and the gift that novels can always bring of the insight into other people's lives. I think as for me, the greatest gift of fiction really is I'm a willing surrenderer when I read, and I can fall into a fictional or a non-fictional world easily, and if the writer is skillful to bring it alive for me, and I'm exposed to those sides of life, and like you described, not just in history but in the present day, and to develop a true empathy for other people, and not to be judging them as the architects of their own destiny, which very few of us, let's face it, have the privilege to be, right?
True.
We're so much circumstantial of what was allowed to happen to us, and then what we maybe had the character and the good fortune, again, of genes to take advantage of. But for an awful lot of people, what's the one, oh, be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle. Is that forever true? That's from ancient Egypt, but is that forever true? Yes, look around at you instead, and it's so easy to be scornful and saying, oh, that homeless person, it's their own fault. Really? Mental illness is their own fault, you know?
Right.
So I get impatient with that level of coldness, and at the same time am nurtured by that level of empathy when other people bring that home to me.
I suspect that's always been part of your story, but or has it not? Have you grown
It
into
has,
it?
and it's absolutely grown over time. And I'll never forget my shock. Ties in with everything professionally, but in the 80s I used to ride my bicycle to shows.
Right.
And we were in Sacramento, and I was riding across town that day, and I saw two women with their kids standing on a street corner with a sign that said, "We'll work for food." This 80s, I'd never seen that before. It's commonplace now, and I hope still as sad as it always was. But I was shocked to see this. And again, these were not reprobates. And I grew up with, you know, the hobo jungle in St. Catharines when I was growing up and all that. And you grew up, and at that time too, I thought they knew a secret. Like when I was a little boy and I knew about the hobo jungles and all that, and I thought, oh, they retired from the world because they knew something that we don't know.
Right.
Something like you just said, right?
Yeah, and they probably do, by the way.
They may well have. Yeah, and looking back at hobo culture has not been examined as much as it might be. I think it was remarkable through the Depression years, the secret language and code letters they used to put places and how they survived all that. And I see a bit of that in RV gypsies. There's a comparable subculture going on right now. I see around the back streets of LA where people live in old wrecked up RVs, and they must have some wireless among themselves telling them what streets are safe to park on, and finding some way outside the system.
Down on Rose Street in Venice Beach, I see an awful lot of them pop in and out, and there was one that was on my street, and I always look in that, they put newspapers on the windows, and I think, the Tom Waits lyric, you know, what's he building in there?
All right.
What's he building? But not from a place of uncomfortableness. I just like, I bet you it's
That's
really
mine
cool.
is curiosity, absolutely, as it was as a little boy. I was curious about those hobos.
I suppose all this can't not impact your lyricism.
Oh, I absolutely hope that it does. And I traveled a lot in Africa in the late 80s and 90s, and certainly it changed me forever and gave me a level of generosity and understanding that does and should change you forever. And to where I could never stand to hear anybody complain about slow room service again. You know, in those respects, you become much more adaptable as a human being, and more generous and more understanding about the other ways that there are to be. Travel in Mexico among those people and try not to be moved. You know, you shouldn't try not to be. You should just absorb that culture for how rich it is.
Right.
And the same in West Africa. You know, you're traveling through an ancient culture that is completely different from ours, and you can either dismiss it, or you can go, wait a minute, these people didn't have writing, but all of them speak 6 languages. Their oral tradition, they all know 600 years of history, and the stories that they can tell and the wisdom of their little sayings is beyond us. it's separate from us, and it's not to be judged. It's to be learned from, learn their sense of time, learn their sense of the word, the spoken word.
Some of that stuff is, when you go to sub-Saharan Africa, North Africa, you can see it because it's a stark contrast from what we grew up with, right? So you can see it. But in other places, let's say you're going on a road trip in mid-America, it's maybe not as obvious.
No,
the
it
things
takes some
to
time,
find.
and you have to dig out the history. And one thing I've learned in writing is that when I stumble across all those histories, just off the top of my head, Jerome, Arizona, I thought of this tiny little hillside dot of artist community now. But when you look back on it,
there's that famous hotel that's not too. There's a whole mining camp, right?
Yeah,
that's right. It was
and in the early 1900s, it was the wickedest town in the West, and they gave this list of all the terrible things that were happening there. And as I go along now, I plant for my readers. Look, there are a lot of stories here. If you're interested, I want to keep moving with the rest of this story for the rest of my audience. But if you're interested, man, there are stories there.
I just took my Airstream trailer through Jerome for the first time this summer, and I stopped and I went up to that town, and you read the history of how nasty some people were to each other, and there's always the good sisters that come in that try to save everybody, and it's this little microcosm of what we've always been as a people.
And a continuity too. Last time we worked through Mississippi and Alabama, a lot of times if we do a show, typically you have a day off in a show. So I'm looking at the maps of between those cities, where can I go? Yeah. What kind of theme? And I thought, okay, I'm doing the Civil Rights Tour. And I grew up, I was a boy in the 60s seeing all those terrible things on television and in the newspapers, and the impact of it, and the commendable amount of change we've made since then, with room still to go, of course, but still. Yeah. And I'm going to go to Selma, Alabama, and read up on those places and reconnect with that history that is all of our history and affects the world as it is now, and try to bring that back to life in a way that I can share it with the reader and say, here's why this mattered. Here are the little things that matter. Here are a few songs that matter. Mm-hmm. And this is the world that we have, and why these struggles continue, because there's a generation after generation that's far from the Civil War now and far from slavery, and maybe wants to make light of it or discount its effects on the country now. But in fact, you can't. You can't.
What's the song that we should play?
To
connect you to that time.
Southern Man, well, we were talking earlier about Nina Simone, and when I was looking into the songs of the South from like Johnny Mercer, Blues in the Night is a great lyrical sort of example, and then the earlier protests and all that. But the most powerful one I came on to, actually, I'm going to switch, A Strange Brew. I think A Strange Fruit. Yeah. That's the song.
That's a pretty one. Strange Fruit, Nina Radio, too. That's a pretty powerful tune. Mm. And for you, does a lot of what you witness when you go on these road trips and these journeys, do they connect to songs for you? Are you listening to music?
Only in the most oblique way. I don't physically listen to music because I just find that there's an inner jukebox that goes on. And very often I will find a song in my head and I can't figure out why. And I had one going up through Utah one time where suddenly Bob Marley was in my head, in Zion Train. Yeah. And I thought, well, I just passed the exit for Zion National Park, so it's nice to trace it. But other times you have no idea where the song came from.
Are you just singing it in your helmet?
But sometimes, on rainy days especially, somehow, there's something about the slow pace of riding on a rainy day that gets me singing, like Jeff Buckley's Hallelujah is a rainy day favorite, or Frank Sinatra's Everything Happens to Me, perfect rainy day song. But the great thing I've noticed about those is as soon as the road demands more attention, or as soon as traffic does, they go into pause, and it can be amazing. Like minutes later, the song starts up at the same place.
And so no headphones for you?
The inner jukebox, no. It's same. Any activity I find is sufficient unto itself, and music listening alone. That's the other side of it. Yeah, if I'm listening to music, I'm listening to music.
It's very Buddhist of you, though.
I suppose.
To be
engagement. I'm fully engaged.
And have you always been like that?
Yeah.
When you go on these journeys and learn these stories, and you're playing in the South, do you go back and tell the other guys in the band, hey, here's what I saw today? Are they asking you?
Well, that's the beautiful part about it, indeed, is that when we see each other after 40 years together, we do have stuff to talk about, what we did on the day off. And always that's been the case, because we'd always had different activities. Right. And I can remember in the 80s when I was riding a bicycle, on the day of the show, I'd ride around the cities, and I started fixing on the art museums. A perfect little location. They always have good bike parking. So I'd ride my bicycle around the town and then stop in the art museum and do a little tour around. And all of them are unique across the country because they were all established by philanthropists who maybe collected German expressionist paintings in St. Louis or African art in Portland.
Right.
And that treasure ends up in the local museum. So I was getting a really good art education, art history, and art critical education at the same time. And Getty shares that interest as well. So it was something I come in, oh, look at this artist I discovered today, or I just went to that museum and recommended him. So all along the way, there has been a path of fresh conversation for us. And last tour, particularly with the string ensemble with us, those were new people to talk to every day. So before a sound check, it became a social thing where we gathered upstage by the string riser and talked with them for a few minutes before we did anything. And it was a beautiful refreshment to the social world after all these years.
Yeah, that must be really just an important part of it. I mean, the truth is, after 40 years, though, you'd think the refreshment could have come earlier. But 40 years is a long time.
Well, I'm saying that it always has.
Always has been that way.
Yeah.
Okay, part 1 done. This is interesting. This is I guess I suppose I didn't know what it was going to be on and what to expect. You know, that's what happens with these. You have no idea. Interesting. I mean, for sure, and you can tell in the lyrics, just from the beginning of Rush to their later years, that, I mean, you know, he uses the word empathy a lot. That kind of thing definitely comes out more as they move along, right? In their later years, all that kind of thing definitely comes out more, which, you know, I'm not a fan of. That's not to say that I'm not a fan of empathy or that I don't have that, but I just don't like it in the lyrics and maybe it's how they do it. I don't know. Maybe that's how I do it. I know that there are some people that like that kind of stuff. You know, there are people that like those songs. I get it. Totally fine. But the thing that I find just different things interesting, things that I caught on this video, like talking about all the RVs that are parked on specific streets in LA. I remember seeing that. And I also remember many of those communities, specific ones, wanting to get them out of there because they don't want them outside of their $1 million houses, you know? So there's kind of like this thing. It's like, and then also he brought up the whole, you know, hobos and homeless people and people asking for money and you know, looking for work and will work for food and things like that. And also like, you know, homeless people and mental illness and, you know, empathy regarding that. And the whole difference between the, you know, the scorn of it, you know, they did it to themselves. They brought it upon themselves and no, let's empathize with them. Let's help them, this, that, and the other thing, all that kind of thing, you know, mental illness, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And even romanticizing the living in an RV on a street in LA kind of thing. I'm like, really? You want to romanticize that? You think that's romantic? You know, like, wow, what's he building in there? It's like, that guy's probably just trying to survive, figure out what's happening, you know, moment to moment practically, right? Hoping nobody knocks on the door, etc. You know, I mean, I don't, you know, this is where I'm like, you know, 74 to 85, you know, this is where, you know, I go to begging hands and bleeding hearts will only cry out for more. And where I'm like, I'm not saying that they're the bleeding hearts. Sometimes they are, but other times it's the extreme empathizers. And I'm just like, at some point, people's personal choice matters. It matters. How you got somewhere is not just, you know, he's talking about, you know, like you know, you think that, you know, lots of times it's things like, you know, destiny and stuff like that. And I'm like, hang on, come on. I know you really? You think that you were just destined to be where you were? Specifically, like you were destined to make it to, you know, destiny and luck and things like that. And, you know, where you were born into. I'm not saying that those things aren't a factor, because they are. But at some point, I think that if we're going to help ourselves out, we have to look at the choices, the individual choices. Like, you can be as microscopic as possible. Like, even my choice to drink coffee, right? That's like a microscopic choice. But the more I do this, Is it going to have effects in the future? You know, just things like that. I'm not trying to get like dumb deep on you or whatever. I'm just some idiot musician, right? But I'm just trying to have a conversation a little bit about this and what they're talking about. I'm like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm not saying don't help people and don't help people that need help. And certainly, you know, like help people that want help, you know, and need help. But there are also people, like I used to do this gig downtown LA weekly that this guy that lived on Skid Row would come in every week, and everybody knew him, and he would come in, and he was really smart, actually, really smart, but he didn't want help. He like wanted to be where he was. Like he had family in the area and everything, but like he liked doing what he was doing. Okay, fine. Okay, fine. You know, I'm just saying that there are all types, and you can't like, you know, things are like more on an individual basis, but also like this is that person's choice, you know, and this is that person's choice. And if you choose this, things are going to happen in the future. If you choose this, things are going to happen in the future. And if you're like, you know what, I'll go with this one, or you know what, I'll go with this one, that matters, right? Anyways, I'm going to get off all this crap. You know, it's just a lot of that stuff. Personal responsibility matters, period. Okay, so I don't know if you've noticed what's back here. I've got some ornaments, some Christmas tree ornaments that my wife made. Wow. And we're going to give away, I have 10 of these, and we're going to give them away. So if you want one, email me your name and your address. Please be in the United States, since I'm going to be paying for these to be mailed. Please be in the United States. Okay? And I'll mail you one. I'll pick 10 and I'll mail you one. First 10 to mail me your address gets one of these. I'm going to mail it to you. So that's what I was alluding to earlier in terms of stick around. You should probably stick around. So if you stuck around, you're a real Justin Panariello channel watcher, and I appreciate that. So email me, jpanreadsemail@gmail.com if you want this Christmas tree ornament. Wow, amazing. Awesome. Okay, guys. Part 2 will be coming up. I'll catch you in the next video.